Before we get started, this is part 2 of our conversation. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I recommend going back to catch up. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So, I think we've touched on this a bit, but can we talk about kind of the invisible costs or opportunity costs of being a woman in leadership, particularly for those of us trying to hold space for patients and our entire team at work, our kids, our spouses, and while also trying to show up as our best selves, like take care of our own health. We talk a lot about self-care is not selfish, and I think that's kind of a catchy line, but I do think it is really important for us to do that and to understand that self-care isn't like always massages and manicures, right? Like that, if that's part of your self-care, that's great, but that's not necessarily what the true depth of what that means is. And it's more about doing the things that enable you to do the things, right? Like we just talked about the planning and organization so that you are able to do that. So you are able to build a business. Your time is free, not tied. You're not tied up to someone else. Things like that. So I would love to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think one invisible cost is eroding of self-confidence. Because when there are so many expectations, external expectations as well as internalized expectations, it's really easy to start feeling like you're not measuring up, like you're dropping the ball, and confidence starts to be eroded. And when confidence is eroded, it's hard to advocate for yourself in medicine, and then you're much more likely to be invisible, be taken advantage of, feel like you don't really have a voice, and it all goes back to the confidence. So it's really important to keep track of your expectations. You know, what are my expectations for myself, and what are the external expectations, or what I presume or assume the external expectations are, and how can I modify those so that it doesn't take such a toll? I think there's also a physical toll. So many women end up with migraines, metabolic disorders as a result of pushing too hard, depleting themselves. Going back to your comments on self-care, I think often there are these terms that we become sort of sensitized to, like burnout, self-care, and people just start to roll their eyes. So I think thinking of it as energy in versus energy out. You know, energy out happens all day long. So what can you do to bring energy in? That's the whole idea of self-care. People will say to me all the time, but I rest all the time, or I just crash on the weekend. But that it's not enough just to crash. You actually have to fill the tank. I often use the analogy of the car. You know, you can say this car should be just fine. It's brand new. It has a great engine. Yes, well, if it doesn't have gas or it doesn't have spark plugs or battery, it's not going to run. And all of those elements are energy into the car. So really looking at that. I think another invisible cost is the cost to our relationship and our family systems, because when we have to be there for everybody else at work and we're pulled in a million different directions, it's easy to show up at home in a way where we're not engaged, where we're on our devices scrolling, where we're on our computers doing charting late at night so that we meet a standard and don't get penalized for having charts out. So, you know, our family relationships start to suffer as a result, and that's often invisible. We aren't able to focus on what our values are and instead assume other people's values for us, and later feel like we're a shell of ourselves and that we've lost parts of ourselves along the way.
Yeah, so I love this concept of, and it's something that I was recently introduced to, and I think it's such an important thing for us to understand. It's the idea of not just resting, but refilling your cup. And so what that kind of means to me is that instead of on Sunday, when you have some time, maybe if you get some time to yourself, if your spouse is home, there's like taking a nap or doing something that makes you feel alive. Like whether that's, for me, a lot of times it's like exercise. That's something that fills my cup. But for other people, it might be like an art class or going to a museum or doing something that makes you feel, going to a new restaurant, whatever it is, it's your thing, like doing that. So you're not a well slept, well rested empty tank, but you're a well rested full tank. And I think, oh, we can understand that in that when we're doing jobs and careers that we love, where we feel like we're doing something for the world or we're doing something that really lights us up or that's creative, and we get to do things like, for me, I love doing this podcast. It fills me up to have these conversations, that we can understand that brings a joy into work, and it brings a joy into like crunching the numbers and accounting, right? Like it's like, okay, well, I'm doing that. I have to do that, but I also get to do this. And we can understand it in that way, but also translating that into our lives of like refilling, giving ourselves the fuel to do the hard things, by also balancing that with things that really energize us. I love that concept.
I might mention one thing here that, when we're talking about filling our tank and the invisible cost, there's emotional fatigue, there's physical fatigue, there's mental fatigue, and sometimes people's resistance is, I'm just too tired, I'm exhausted. So I'll make suggestions about activities or engage ways they can engage in life. And it's like, are you kidding? I'm so exhausted. So what I will ask people is to try and define whether it's physical, mental, emotional exhaustion, and then to even give percentages to each can be really helpful. And then forcing yourself to do whatever it is that deep down inside you want to do, and ask yourself afterwards, do I feel better or worse for having done it?
I think that's a great way to look at it, because if it's something that you thought you were too exhausted to do, but then you do it and you feel better, then maybe, in fact, you weren't. Maybe you were exhausted because you weren't doing the thing. So my question is, now that you've worked with so many people in the medical space, do you think that there are specific things about being a physician, specifically in the healthcare system of today in America, that is perpetuating or exacerbating this feeling of overwhelm, burnout, exhaustion in women physicians?
Well, I think that's, a very valid question, and a very, probably has a very complex answer. I think there are so many contributing factors. One of the things about medicine is we're managing care. And when you're managing care, sometimes it feels like it's this never ending loop of frustration where you're just trying to manage rather than really heal or embrace deep-seated changes, and seeing transformation happen. So it becomes very discouraging when you're just managing care versus really being able to meet goals, feel like you're producing results. It's sort of a never-ending cycle of frustration often. So I think that's just, part of medicine in general. And people being sick or not feeling well is also a part of the system, right? And it fuels the system. And so physicians who are attracted to regenerative medicine or functional medicine get really, really excited sometimes, or at least initially, because it starts to feel like, oh, it's a totally different focus where we're really seeing results, and that gets exciting versus just being on that treadmill. So that's a part of it. I think that sometimes the financial focus, but it needs to be there because most people that come into medicine have huge educational debt that they're bringing into the practice. And so I think the relationship to finances and money is a huge piece of is part of the problem. It's what's needed in order to fuel this big machine called healthcare, but it also keeps us from really sometimes feeling successful. The old image of a physician being the highest wage earner in a community is antiquated. That's just not the way it is. And often they're trying to live beyond their means in order to keep that, status symbol sort of going when it no longer really applies. And so that can really fuel disenchantment, feeling frustrated, and just like you're being negatively impacted by the whole financial system that is medicine, as well as the healthcare.
Yeah, I think that the financial part, it's not one that we love to talk about, but it's so important. And I think that a lot of physicians do have a lot of medical debt. And also we're not trained in finances or how to manage our finances. And also, at least in my generation, when we were growing up, physicians were much higher earners than they are now. Like the salaries were higher than 20 years ago than they are now, despite inflation. And I think that the expectations that some of us went into medicine with of what our lives would look like at the end of it are not being met by traditional practicing of medicine now. And I think that that is a challenge. I do think that physicians need to, young physicians, or maybe it's us, maybe we need to be doing a better job of educating young physicians what debt means and what taking out loans means, because I think that of course banks are trying to sell loans. Like they will do better the more money you borrow and the longer it takes you to pay it back. Like that's how they make money. And so I know a lot of people who graduated around the time that I did fell into these traps of income-based repayment and are sold these shiny loan opportunities that help them lead a more normal lifestyle as a medical student than most students have, and it's not like when our parents were in medical school and those loans were at 1% interest. Now they're accumulating at 8% interest while you're not paying them off. And that's a huge number. And I think that financial strategy and understanding finances and budgeting is so, so important. And your finances are a huge ticket to your freedom. I mean, my husband was in that boat. And when we graduated from fellowship, he had more than a house mortgage and in medical school debt. And like you said earlier in this conversation of doing things as a we, I really took ownership of that. And I was like, this is our debt because this is our family and these are our kids. And if something happens to you and you can't work anymore, guess who gets to pay it off? Me by myself. And so I really, we buckled down and we came up with a strategy to pay that loan off very quickly and aggressively. And I understand that that might not be the best option for everybody. I'm not pretending to know everything about everybody's life, but there are people who are told that, okay, well, you'll have loan forgiveness in 20 years or 10 years if you work in this type of hospital setting or this or that. In my opinion, you cannot trust anyone more than you trust yourself. And if you can buy yourself financial freedom by being mindful of your loan early, like don't take out more than you need, or if your parents can help you, but you don't want them to because of a reason, really assess that. Because if your parents can help you and they're willing to, and it's not going to be bad in any way, then that might be a good option given how expensive medical school is right now. If there are other alternatives to anything you can do to shrink your loan, your debt from medical school, very seriously look into that and very seriously look into how you can aggressively pay it off early, because as you grow in medicine, your lifestyle grows, you have children, they have needs, their lifestyle grows. So if you can get it, I think that was like financially the best thing that we did it when we had nothing, right? Nobody helped us pay off our loan. Our parents didn't help us pay off our loan. We did it while I was starting my business. Like, it's possible to do this. It's just you have to be extremely strategic to buy your own freedom later from this without it hovering as like a dark cloud over your head with fear. Like my biggest fear was what happens and we can't afford this loan payment anymore, or what happens if, because you're only young for a short window of time after your fellowship is done, right? And so life starts getting real pretty fast. And so I think they say that there's like this death forgiveness, but when you look in the fine print, there's no death forgiveness. Okay. Like this is somebody took out this loan, they let you borrow it. It's your responsibility at the end of the day. And so I think that's a very, very important point that we don't talk enough about in medicine, and certainly not enough with medical students.
100%. And I think so to advocate for yourself with the banks and the companies that you've taken it out with as well. Sometimes they will negotiate with you, because I've had people in their 60s still owing on their medical debt from going to school. And I've also had people who've retired that with a huge medical debt, because it just kept compounding. So this is why it's very important for you to advocate for yourself in your work environments. Really understand what the wages you're being offered are, what the overhead is, what the RVUs are, and what that means. Because sometimes people will say, oh, it looks like it's $360,000, but there's all of this fine print. It's not really $360,000. You have much less to live on, plus pay back your debt. So your point, and especially for women who often are not paid at the same level, just as you previously said. Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, and I think that, understand what taxes means
Mhm,
and
mhm.
how much that's gonna get taken out of your income, because, yeah, it's a lot. It's a substantial amount, and if you have several thousands of dollars of loans to pay off, then, it eats in. The other thing is, like, don't get yourself in a position where you're house poor. Like, don't buy the big house, the big cars right out of training. That is I think that the period when you graduate from training is most crucial, because you're used to living small. At least I hope you are as a resident, right? Not getting yourself
Yes.
into more debt,
Mhm.
and you're not exposed to a lifestyle. So if you can really buckle down and get rid of your debt when you're young before you're exposed to a lifestyle, then you'll know the means with which you can live. And so you're not saddled by, like, okay, I have to make $500,000 to have my lifestyle, because for the 3 to 5 years out of your training, you were still living like a resident. And I think that if you know and you have the confidence that you can do that, then you're like, oh, hey, I could start my own practice. Hey, I could do this other thing that is more important to me. Or maybe I can work fewer hours because I do have these responsibilities at home. It gives you so much more flexibility if you're lean and you are then debt free. If then you all of a sudden have that extra $5,000 in your bank account every month that you aren't paying to the debt. And it's just a different way of looking at things, which I think many doctors have this idea of, I deserve this material thing because I worked so hard and I work so hard at work. The fact of the matter is, nobody deserves a material thing. Either they can afford it or they cannot afford it. It's pretty simple. Either you have enough money for it or you don't. You don't deserve a thing. And so you deserve to be respected. You deserve your human right. There's some things that you do deserve, but having a material thing that's like a specific house or car or handbag or pair of shoes, like, no, no, no. And so I think that, but a lot of doctors do think that way, especially a lot of women doctors. There's like these Facebook groups called Dr. Purse Club and things like that. And I just laugh because they're fun to follow along. But, I think there is this mentality among women physicians of I deserve this because I work hard. And I think it can be very damaging. So before I let you go, I worry that this episode might be a little bit like of a downer in some ways, and that's not the goal at all. Our goal is to say your potential is infinite to have a life that you love and where you can do all the things that are important and valuable to you, and your best asset is your mindset. And so I would love for you to kind of talk to that. Like, how can we inspire women to go get after it? Go get after the things that they really value, how they can come out of this space where misery loves company. Because a lot of women doctors and a lot of doctors in general are in these like Facebook forums and groups where we just complain, but maybe we can change that narrative and say, we have a power as physicians, as these professionals, and a very rewarding career. How can we make the most of our lives and live our best for ourselves, or what we see as best, I guess is a better way of putting it.
Right. Well, I agree with you 100% about those groups that are really focused on negativity. And so, not at all. Did not want that to be the focus here at all today. Instead, starting at that place where we're getting real with ourselves. And like we talked early on about how we assume, compare, and contrast, and then make up a story about that for ourselves. Hopefully today we've dispelled some of those myths that, everybody struggles with balance. Everybody struggles with how to be an empowered, highly driven, successful female physician. And be real with yourself about what the challenges are. The other side of the challenges are you get to now decide what you want your life to look like. Often the values and beliefs that we have are assumed values and beliefs. What was your mother's values and belief? What do you see, reflected in your religious communities or in your cities? And then ask yourself, are those values and beliefs that are reflected in me? And if the answer is yes, but I want to change that, or no, not at all, then let's start defining, making new definitions about what it means to be successful, to be an empowered woman, to what freedom's definition is for you. And each woman gets to decide for herself. There's so much potential for unlimited freedom, unlimited resources if you are, really clear about what it is you value, what you believe, and what you want, and then creating a system to make that achievable. So part of that system needs to be really paying attention to how you think. How we think influences how our lived experience is. And so, are your thoughts majorly negative? Are they sort of a constant compilation of things you have to do in order to be okay? And do you want to continue to think that way? Or do you want to take charge of your thoughts, not have your thoughts be in charge of you? Once you're in charge of your thoughts, you will notice that the emotions follow. That, all of those places where you felt insecure, overwhelmed, dissatisfied begin to lighten and brighten because you're thinking about life differently. And when your feelings then follow and start to shift, then you start to connect with hope. You start to connect with the what, the how, and the why. What am I here to do? How am I going to accomplish that? And why? And I think often we start with the why first, and then we get confused or overwhelmed. It's like, I don't know. I don't know. So start with the what first, then go to the how. Then the why will be, obvious to you. So yes, we want to inspire everyone listening that this is a time where you have power to really change your life, to live by a totally different standard than what, somebody else in your field might have, because there's a lot of autonomy inside specialization, even in medicine. So allow yourself that. Allow yourself to dream, because once you're in charge of your thinking and your feeling, then you will often find that you have energy to begin imagining. And once you can imagine and dream, then you can start to create. So it's the thinking, the feeling, the imagining and designing, and then the creative process that then is what transforms lives.
Absolutely. I love that. And it all starts between our ears, right? Like, I think that changing the way we perceive things is absolutely possible. And getting very clear about the life that we want to live, the relationships that we want to have, the people that we want to serve, like, who is it that I want to be to other people, to myself? Like, what kind of person do I want to be? Is so important. And I'll give a sort of funny example of this. Not funny, but it's one that maybe people can relate to. So in our household, my husband is the best human I know, but we do have somewhat traditional roles. And there was a time after pandemic where he started working part-time because he's an ICU doc, and he was working 24, probably 18-hour shifts a month, if not more, for in that very challenging time. And everybody was dying, and he was burnt out, really. And so we made a conscious decision to let him work fewer shifts a month, recalibrate, and we were in a fortunate situation where I was earning enough that we could afford to do that. And in that time period, it started to annoy me, okay? Like, he was home a lot, and still a lot of the things weren't getting done, and I was getting a little frustrated because I was, like what we talked about, right? I was the primary breadwinner, and, like, it was challenging. And then we're not the type of couple that explosively fights, but you can sense, like, we can feel each other's tension. And then one day he's like, "I don't feel like you resent me anymore." And I was like, "That's because I decided I wasn't going to anymore." And he's like, "What do you mean? How does one just decide?" I was like, "Well, I have a very powerful mind, and I know unequivocally that I'm a woman who is loved, and that is enough for me." And he was like, "I don't understand. I don't understand how you can just flip a switch like that." I was like, "Well, I have a very powerful mind, and I decided that this wasn't worth me being mad about anymore. Like, there's literally no reason. Like, we're fine. Everything is fine. Everything is good. And even if it wasn't, like, I get to choose. Like, I get to choose what my mind tells me to feel." And sometimes, I'm not saying that I'm always 100% in control of my emotions, or that I'm a robot or something. Like, sometimes I get mad. Sometimes, like, we have disagreements. I'm not saying it's perfect, but in that moment, I recognized that I had the power to change how this was going. And I did it. Like, literally one day I decided that I wasn't going to resent him anymore. And I honestly haven't resented him since, because that's not the type of person who I want to be. Also, he's a great husband. It's not like, he's like some jerk and that I'm powering through this. Like he's great. But it's just to say our minds are incredibly powerful, and when we can see it, every brilliant thing that happens in the world in our lives starts as a thought, right? And so the thought to have a child, the thought to create something beautiful, the thought to have a great work, everything starts in our heads. So if we can change the way we think, or continue to think in a positive way, in ways that serve us, then that'll put us light years ahead if we're not there yet. So I think that all of our potential is infinite to create a life that we love. No, we can't do every single thing. No, we can't. But we can hold gratitude for the things that we can do. We can hold space for the people that are important to us. We can remove people who are toxic to the way we think. I mean, I hate to say that. And it took me a long time to be okay with removing toxic people from my life, because you sort of feel like you're abandoning somebody, but at the same time, it's not helping them either. Like nobody's winning in that situation. So I think removing toxic inputs, whether they're a person or a substance or the way we sleep or don't sleep, all of these things can make such a big difference. And we all have the power to harness all of those things. And so I really hope that you guys leave this conversation recognizing that power, and finding ways to harness those strengths and those powers that we have within us.
Yes, agreed. And you're not alone.
Absolutely not. Come and slide into my DMs. We can chat if you're having a struggle, or certainly you can reach out to Sydney, because she is the real expert here. Um, Sydney, any last thoughts you want to leave with our audience before we let you go?
I think my last thought is just, to take a moment to pause from time to time and reflect on all you've accomplished. Sometimes when we're striving, and we keep going to the next, oh, now we want a child, now we want a different type of practice, now we want, and we don't take enough time to just reflect on everything that we have done. And so, everyone listening, you're amazing. You've done incredible things. Take time to reflect and write those down. Also, keep track of all the many words of appreciation and gratitude that you've received along the way, because that can be part of the fuel that helps you really engage with life in a way where you feel supported and where you feel good about yourself and confident.
Yeah, that career achievement escalator can be a joy suck, as well as the comparison that we talked about earlier. So really identifying when we get stuck in those places is so important. I love that. So thank you so much, Sydney, for being here with us. Where can our audience find you if they want to get in touch?
Well, you can find me at sydneyashland.com. Sydney is my first name. And, you can text me. You can find my number on my website. You can email me. I look forward to connecting in the coming years with many more successful physicians and meeting you in the struggle, and then applauding the transcendence that I get to experience all the time when I see you soar.
Thanks so much. And we can't wait to connect with you more in the future. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.